Welcome, everyone, to another chapter of Murder in Stratton County. A murder mystery with twists and turns. Written by Elizabeth Spoon and Ryland Mason. Narrated by me, Brian Shepard. Chapter 12. Romance blossoms in the mists of murder. Brian stirred from his slumber, rolling over and grabbing for his watch on the nightstand. As he rubbed the sleep from his eyes, he could see the hands on his watch. Just past 6 a.m. He got up and out of bed and stretched. Heading for the kitchen to put on some coffee, he grabbed his cell phone. Oddly, he had one bar and 2 messages. One was from Dugan, informing him he was going out of town for Malloy's wake. The other from a number he didn't recognize. He clicked on it, but it was empty. "That is odd," he said. He placed the phone down on the counter and started making his coffee. While it brewed, he went into the living room and started making a fire to warm up the cottage. As the fire began to crackle, he went back into the kitchen and retrieved his coffee. Fishing for his cigarillos, he lit one and went back into the living room to sit in front of the fire and enjoy his coffee, reminiscing about the events of yesterday and Jordan. He finished his coffee, tossing his cigarillo into the fireplace. Another half cup, he thought. Getting up, he started towards the kitchen when he heard a knock at the door. He slipped on his bathrobe over his pajamas and went to answer the door. As he neared the door, they knocked again. I'm coming, he murmured. He peered through a small window, but it was frosted, so all he could really see was a shadow. Was it Jordan? Maybe someone else? "Who is it?" Raising the volume of his voice so they could hear him through the door. He waited for a response. There was none. He asked again. "Who is it?" The shadow was gone. Now he was scared. He moved away from the door and back towards the kitchen, where he was blocked by a wall, but could see out into the yard. He watched to see if anyone would cross into the yard, but he saw nothing. "Screw this," he said. He went to the gun cabinet and reached for the hidden key, pulled out his shotgun and a couple rounds. Loading the gun, he went to the door, flung it open, and yelled, "You better be running." He kicked the screen door open and aimed the gun out, looking around. All of a sudden, a giant woodpecker swooped down and intentionally buzzed him in the head. Brian jumped back, tripping on the tie to his bathrobe. The shotgun fired off a shell, taking out the tree branches on the tree next to the house. Brian then fell backwards into the snow, his finger still on the trigger. The second round exploded out of the shotgun, taking out more branches on the tree. Not sure whether to laugh at himself or the bird for tricking him, Brian picked himself up out of the snow and was dusting himself off when all of a sudden Jordan came ripping across the field on his snowmobile, turned and blew up the driveway, and jumped off, leaving it running. "Are you okay? I heard gunshots." Jordan took Brian by the elbow. "Yes, I'm fine," Brian said, smiling, thinking of the bird. "Are you sure you're okay?" Jordan asked again, this time looking Brian over, just to make sure. Yes, I'm fine," Brian said, tying his bathrobe shut. "What happened? Why are you shooting a double-barrel shotgun at 7 in the morning?" Brian just looked at him somewhat embarrassed. "You may not believe me when I tell you," Brian replied. "Try me." They ventured back into the cottage, Brian's robe soaked from the wet snow. You better get into some dry clothes. Jordan helped him get his robe off and hung it off the edge of a chair near the fireplace to dry. Brian went into the bedroom and stripped off his wet pajamas, tossing them to the side of the bed. He fished around for some jeans and a long-sleeve shirt. Slipping on a pair of wool socks, he grabbed the wet pajamas and hung them off the bathroom door to dry. As he came out of the bedroom, Jordan was standing with 2 cups of tea in his hands. "Oh, thanks," Brian said, taking the cup of tea. "I thought you could use this," Jordan said, taking a sip of his tea. "I sure can." Brian took the empty cartridges and the gun and put it back into the gun cabinet. "So, you want to tell me why you're trying to kill the tree out front a couple branches at a time?" Brian smiled. He started to explain to Jordan in more detail that someone had tried to kill him. Jordan leaned back, listening intently as Brian went on about the mansion fire and his maid's untimely demise. "So when I heard the knock at the door and no one responded, generally I got scared that someone was here to try to kill me. Turned out to be a damn woodpecker. Pesky bird sounded like someone knocking at the door." Jordan just started laughing. "Forgive me, I know that part of this is serious, but come on, you have to admit it's funny." Sitting down, Brian thought about it for a moment, and Jordan could see the smile on his face. "Laugh it up, Doc," Brian said, smiling at Jordan. For a brief moment, there was a silence, as both of them just sat there looking at each other, sipping on tea, almost as if both were trying to figure out how to break the ice. "Well, I am glad that you are here. I'm not sure if we would have been able to handle what has happened without a doctor in town. So thank you for showing up early. And speaking of early, how did you get to me so quickly?" Jordan studied Brian's face, which to him looked like Brian was impressed, yet still unsettled. Jordan would have to choose his words wisely, as he did not want to scare off the mayor. "I happened to be out this morning with the snowmobile. I was checking to see how far my property line is, as I have not been behind the house. I made it to the mailbox at the end of the driveway and was about to start making my way back when I heard gunshots. I figured it had to be your place, as we really don't have neighbors out around here," Jordan said as he stood up and placed his cup and saucer into the sink. "Well, that was very kind of you to want to check on me. With everything going on, with Prudence and the fire, I'm surprised I didn't stay with my secretary," Brian said as he finished his cup and, like Jordan, placed the cup in the sink. "Okay, let's go sit by the fire and stay warm. I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy our conversation," Brian said as they both headed for the living room. "So, you're Governor Prescott's son," Brian said, to finally start the conversation. "Wait, you know my father?" Jordan asked as his eyes widened in surprise. "I lost your father 4 years ago as New York governor. If I recall, your father was furious that you took your internship at a local clinic in the Bronx." Jordan just sat there looking at Brian as if he was trying to figure out the connection, or if he did in fact hear about Brian running against his father. Yet the more he thought about it, he remembered he was better off studying than keeping tabs on the election while in school. The only person who kept Jordan in the loop when Jordan asked was his best friend Cameron. As if everything from that year came back to him all at once, he stood up and paced in front of the fireplace. "Oh my God, you're right. I almost forgot about the election as I was in school for most of it, and I decided that going home for break was not an option. So a friend of mine and I took off for Orlando for a week. Jordan said as he was looking at the pictures of Brian's family until he saw one photo that would tie everything together. Cameron. Wait a minute. Is that? No, can't be, Jordan said as he looked at the photo which sat on the mantel along with other photos. That was taken 4 years ago when I decided to run for governor. Cam told me I had a large fight on my hands when it came to dealing with your father. And it's the moment I asked him to help me by becoming my campaign manager, he said, looking at the photo from his chair. I can't believe you're friends with Cameron. What a small world. I'm still trying to figure out why he never told me about you, or why we've never met before, Jordan said, confused as he looked at Cam in the picture. I remember going to a party that Cam was having at his parents' house upstate after I announced I was running. He invited all of our friends and even old coworkers when I worked in retail. That's how I met Cam, Brian said, trying to remember what happened that night at the party. Then it dawned on him. I remember Cam coming to me towards the end of the party and apologizing because his best friend, who he wanted to have me meet, called and said he was not coming. I never did find out who it was, as it was supposed to be a surprise, I guess, Brian said as he shifted himself on the sofa. I was supposed to be at that party. I'm the one that you were supposed to meet that night. Oh man, this really is a small world, Jordan said as he made his way back to the chair, sitting across from Brian. I'm so sorry I could not make it as the clinic was short-staffed, so I called and let him know that I was not able to make it. I just wished I knew it was you, he said, now looking into Brian's eyes as if to say, I'm sorry. Oh, you didn't know, and I had no clue he was trying to set me up. I explained it was not the right time if I was going to be focusing on my career, and at the time I was beating your father and becoming governor, Brian said, sighing, remembering how he ultimately lost anyway. Well, at any rate, I'm happy that I finally got to meet you, even though I can't say it is the best time considering your maid and the potential people after you. I just hope my father is not in any way responsible for this, Jordan said with more sternness in his voice. I'll have to make a call and see if I can't find anything out, he said, getting up from the chair and grabbing his cell phone from his pocket. Me too. There's only one person I can think of, Brian said, looking back over at the picture. Cam, they both said at the same time. Cameron would hopefully know what Jordan's father was up to, so to give Brian and Jordan a heads up for what could possibly be coming to Stratton. Jordan unlocked his phone and searched for Cam's number. Should he text? Was Cam busy? It was Sunday, so not too busy, as he normally had Sundays off, unless one of his employees called out again. Jordan called Cam's cell in hopes he would answer. Hello? Cam said on the other end, as if he was sleeping. Cameron, it's Jordan, he said as he could now hear Cam moving around. Jordan, what can I do for you on this early Sunday? And oh yeah, it's my day off. Damn, I forgot to silence my phone again, he said, now half awake and more alert this time. Good morning to you, too. I was wondering if I could ask you something really important. You don't have to right away, yet it is time sensitive. I already don't like where this is going. Wait, before you ask, how is your new practice going? I've been waiting for your call, yet you must be busy settling in. Did you find an office? Cam tried to delay whatever Jordan was going to ask. Of course I did, and yes, I have been busy getting the office ready. I seem to have found the perfect place to set up shop. My practice is on the main street of Stratton, Jordan said as Brian stoked the fire, listening. Stratton? Oh my God, you live in the same town as my friend Brian. I can't believe this, Cam said with excitement in his voice. If he was not up before, he was now. Believe it, Cam, Brian said, walking over and standing next to Jordan. Okay, what in the world is going on? Brian, is that you? Cam said, sounding confused now. Yes, Cam, it is. Good morning to you, too, Brian replied, smiling. I can't believe this. You two finally meet and you're calling me? On a Sunday, no less. Wait, how did you two meet? Cam asked, wanting to know the answer as if it was juicy work gossip. We will have to wait on that, as what we called for is more important, Jordan said with more concern in his voice. As Jordan and Brian talked with Cameron about what was going on in Stratton so far and how they think it had something to do with Jordan's father, Cameron immediately was in and wanted to help in any way possible. There was no way that anyone was going to hurt the two people that were on his list of important people, and God help the person responsible if Cam tells his mother all of this. She is going to end up kicking some butt. I'm going to have to talk with some people and see if I can't find out what's going on. I know that there's a fundraiser your father's doing tomorrow night at the museum. I was not going to go, yet this makes it worth it, Cam said as he started to brush his teeth. Cam, we're going to let you go. You can call either one of us as soon as you hear anything you think we need to know. Don't do anything stupid and stay away from my father, Jordan said. Jordan then hung up the phone with Cam, and there was nothing to do now until he called after the fundraiser. I was hoping we could go for a ride today, Jordan said, breaking the silence. I was just going to stay home by the fire. I have this feeling that it's not safe for me to wander from home until I need to go to work. Even that has me on edge. I have a feeling that no one thinks to look out here at my cottage as I rarely use it. Oh my goodness. So I'm safe. For how long, he wondered to himself. If you would like, we can head out on the snowmobile and hit some trails I found while out the other day, Jordan asked, hoping Brian would say yes, as a distraction was needed. Brian sat there looking at Jordan, thinking he would be safe as long as he was with him. What could be so bad about this? It's a snowmobile. Snapping back to reality and remembering that they did make plans anyway, the crazy bird-knocking, gun-shooting morning, quickly they're meeting up in a couple of hours. Okay, let me just clean up and change into something more warm, as I don't think this will do. However, I did hear it was going to be partly sunny, which is something this town needs. Sun, Brian said, almost if he was sad just thinking about the town. I will wait here unless you need help in the kitchen, Jordan said as he made his way to the kitchen. No, I'm good. I will just take a second and then we can go, Brian said as he rinsed the dishes and placed them into the drying rack. All changed and ready to go, Brian and Jordan set off outdoors now that the sun was cresting just a smidge over the mountain, which signaled it was going to be an okay day. The snowstorm, murder, and now possible hitmen on the loose after Brian. I need to stop worrying. It's going to give me a heart attack, he said to himself. Jordan handed Brian an extra helmet from under the seat. With one pull, the machine came to life. Jordan hopped on first and tapped the seat behind him. Whatever bad thought, worry, or even the stress Brian had seemed to melt away as soon as he sat behind Jordan. Brian then wrapped his hands around Jordan as tight as he could. You're holding on like we're preparing to fall off, It's not our first time, remember? Jordan said as he turned towards Brian. I always deemed these things dangerous. I hear about accidents all the time, yet I'm guessing I'll be okay. However, I would rather ride a horse, Brian said jokingly. That can be arranged, Jordan said, smiling back at Brian. Yet Brian was not smiling as his eyes widened with that comment. Jordan quickly responded, No, God, no. That came out wrong. I'm sorry. What I meant is that I do in fact have horses, and I would love to go riding with you. That is, if you would like to go sometime. Jordan stopped speaking at that moment and did not wait for an answer, revved the engine, and took off slowly. Then, just about 100 yards from the house, Jordan pressed the handle, and off they went across the field between their properties. Brian, still holding on tight, was able to look around and take in the snow-covered land. It was a beautiful sight to see, and to be in the middle of it with who better than Jordan. Finally, stopping at the edge of Jordan's property, which was lined with old stones piled on top of each other to make a wall that stretched across the rear of the property. That was some ride. I must say it's beautiful to be the only one out here. It's so peaceful, Brian said as they got off. It's the main reason why I took the property. The horses were a bonus. Jordan, finally able to see what his property entailed. Wait, what is that just beyond the trees? Brian said, pointing to the right of them. I'm not sure. It's my first time all the way out here, Jordan said as they began to walk over to whatever was in the shadows of a snow-covered pine tree. Just beyond the tree line, and still within his property, was a small log cabin, a main door and windows on each side. Jordan could tell that this was built many, many years ago as he walked around the building, checking the roof and side walls for any structural damage. Seems to be fine on the outside. I don't see anything wrong with the roof, and I'm sure if there was someone in there, they would have come out by now. Do you want to check inside? Jordan said. Brian figured he was going to ask. This is not something Brian would do. Nope, never, as creepy old buildings were on the list next to haunted houses, which had Brian laughing. Care to share? Jordan said with a smile on his face. I don't do haunted houses, and I was just thinking how everyone says my house looks like one, Brian said, laughing at the thought again. Yet this time it was nerves. I have yet to see your house. Does that mean I won't be able to see you as you will be going to the mansion? Jordan said with sadness, as he was enjoying his time with Brian, and he did not want it to end anytime soon. No, I won't be going back anytime soon, as I don't have use of my kitchen. I have to wait for the fire investigation to finalize before any work can be done. Besides, I have a very good-looking neighbor, Brian said, making Jordan drop his head to the ground, blushing. Cute answer. However, my neighbor happens to be the mayor, who is also a very good-looking mayor, Jordan said as he turned back around to face the door. Jordan stepped up to the door, grabbed the handle, and began to turn, slowly. Surprisingly, it turned and the door opened without an issue. Stepping in, Jordan walked in to an open floor space where the sitting, eating, and kitchen were in the same space. Not a very large room, yet big enough for a couple to live in. Jordan went on slowly, opened what seemed to be the bedroom, and off of that was a small bathroom. Now that Jordan checked out the remaining rooms, he walked over to Brian, who was still standing in the doorway of the cabin. I think I know what this place is, Brian said, looking around. Please do tell. Jordan said, dusting off an old picture that was in glass frame on the table in front of one of the windows. This would have been where the ranch foreman would have lived while taking care of the property, Brian said, checking out the kitchen area. All the way back here? Jordan said, looking at Brian. Back then, if the house was not big enough to house a couple of workers, the owner would have the ranch foreman have his own place on the property. It was easier and saved money, Brian said, as if he knew it was true. And how do you know this, even though it makes perfect sense? Jordan said with a smile. I happen to be a History Channel fan. You learn so much, and it fascinates me, Brian beamed. Besides, I have the same thing on my property. Mine was just renovated, and I added more storage. I will have to show you at some point. Which reminds me, I do have to run to the house to grab a couple of things. No. On second thought, the sheriff is out of town, and I don't feel like bothering the deputy, as I won't go alone. I could always bring you over and help with anything. That way you're not alone, Jordan offered. Okay, if you're sure. I would not want to put you out, Brian said, even though he knew deep down he wanted Jordan there to feel safe. Absolutely. I would not want anything to happen to you. We finally met, remember? I have a feeling I'm not going to want to let you go anytime soon, Jordan said, reaching for his hand, hoping Brian would take it into his, which he did. After leaving the log cabin and making it back to Jordan's house, they made their way into his car to Brian's mansion. A mansion. Why he had to have the biggest house in town was beyond him, and if you really looked at it, was it really a mansion? I guess if you're not used to living in a size this big, then yes, it would look different to someone else. Reaching the end of the driveway, Jordan had the car off and out of the car in a flash, opening Brian's door as he got out. Thank you, Brian said, smiling. If this was back before, Prudence would be here to greet him at the door and offer him tea or coffee. Yet Prudence was gone and not coming back. So now Brian was stepping into an empty house. Jordan looked in awe of the house. Brian seemed to have good taste, as the furniture was about the same age as the house, and would not be surprised at all if it was original to the house. I'm just going to run upstairs and grab a couple of things. Please, make yourself at home. Look around if you wish. I always give people the grand tour. We can always do that after, Brian said as he started to make his way up the stairs to the second floor. The smell of smoke was still pungent throughout the mansion. Brian poked around his bedroom for a few things, while Jordan wandered into the living room looking around. He walked towards the far end of the living room, where there were a set of swinging saloon doors into the kitchen. He pushed open the door while walking into the kitchen. The stove and hood vent were black from soot and smoke. Brian was still upstairs looking through his things. Jordan was shocked at the damage in the kitchen. He left the kitchen and went up the stairs to the second floor, calling out to Brian. Brian stuck his head around the corner of the bedroom door. I'm in here, Brian said as Jordan walked into the bedroom. As he stepped in, something crunched under his foot. He lifted his boot and to see a piece of glass. Brian turned and looked at him. What are you looking at? Brian asked. Jordan bent down to look closer. It's a piece of glass, Jordan said, now looking at what was the stem of a glass. Yeah, it's from my martini glass, Brian said, as the night flooded into his head. Dare I ask? Brian Jordan said, as he pushed the glass piece he had crushed to the side of the wall near the door. I can tell you another time. It's sort of funny but embarrassing, Brian said, turning red. Jordan smiled. You are never dull. Brian finished stuffing his backpack and dug out of the closet with things that he needed from the bathroom and some clothes that he wanted to take with him, zipping it up. Did you find what you needed? Brian flung the backpack over his shoulder. Yep, I think so. He unplugged the phone charger from beside the bed and stuffed it into the front pocket of his jacket. I think that's everything. They made their way back down the stairs to the living room. Brian put the bag down on the floor. Jordan was looking at pictures that lined the hallway to the guest bedrooms. Thanks, everyone. That's part 1 of chapter 12. We'll see you for part 2.